Hello, my yoga family. I wanted to show you one of the tools I've been using to both lengthen and release, as well as strengthen and tone my psoas muscle. Psoas is a core hip flexor. It's involved in abdominal flexion if the legs are fixed, or lifting the legs. And it sits inside the front hip bones, running on either side of the spine and down to the inner legs. So we're going to use our fingers for this to give a mental reference so that the brain can understand what's happening in the body. And you're going to want to be able to lie down on something slippery. So if you're on this is cork, but any kind of solid floor, you'll want to wear socks. If you're on carpet, you'll just have to do what you can to allow your foot to slide. And before we get to the actual practice, I want to show you two landmarks. I'm going to stand up, you won't see my face. So inside your front hip bones, the hip bone, inside that, just medial to it, we're going to use that reference point. So inside by maybe a half inch to an inch, and then lower, so kind of the center of the thigh at the kind of where the hip socket is. If you're sitting like I just sat down, you'll feel that that's a little bit more hollow. So those are the 2 points that we're going to use. Once you've done that, you're going to lie down, and I personally like having something soft to put my spine on. So you're going to lie on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat on the ground. And then the first point that I showed you, you're going to use your fingers just inside your hip bone, so half inch to an inch medially or toward the midline from your ASIS, your front pointy hip bones. And I want you to push down. I like using my 2 first fingers on each hand. Push down with them enough that you feel pressure, like you're making a dent in your flesh, but not so much that you're like doing self-massage or hurting yourself. And all I want you to do is to just lift a foot and feel how this area pops up into your fingers. Now try the other leg. And just notice the sensation, one, of, okay, that muscle, that's your psoas, the iliopsoas area. It's a hip flexor. It's picking up your legs and bringing your legs toward your torso as you do this kind of marching. So this is just to educate you, okay, here's where one landmark is. If you don't feel it engaging, just move your fingers around until you feel it like kind of pop up toward your hands. And you may notice as you're continuing just back and forth with this, that one side turns on or works, feels like it works better or easier or more, or one side's more jumpy. Okay, so that's just kind of the first educational landmark for you. Now, for comparison, what we're going to do is we're going to tilt the pelvis, so anterior tilt, pubic bone between the legs, and low back kind of lifting off the floor. So I'm exaggerating that. I'm extending my tail away from my head. The spine is kind of arching up toward the ceiling. And I'm gonna hold that kind of lordosis, that back bend in the low back with my butt down. And then same landmark, and lift the legs again, march again. And you'll probably notice that it's not firing quite as much. So the psoas is involved in holding this extension of the spine right now. So the more medial fibers of the psoas are more active in the back bend and less active in hip flexing. Okay, so that's just to educate you on what your psoas is doing, all right? Now relax all that back bend effort. And here's the part where we're gonna use the slippery, feet slide on the floor thing. We're gonna do just one leg at a time. And you're gonna go, let's start with the right leg. And you're gonna find that second landmark that I showed you. So this is below your hip bone, below the ASIS, so closer to your feet on your body, just an inch or two. And then go a little bit more toward the middle. So it's like kind of the center of your thigh, kind of just above or near your groin. You're kind of right over the hip socket. And again, you're gonna push down with enough force that you can feel what's happening under there, but not so much that you're going to hurt yourself. And for this one, what we're looking to do is we're looking to keep the pelvis completely neutral. In other words, it's not going to tilt, tuck, or sway. And we're going to begin to just ever so slowly slide the right foot along the floor, pushing the heel out and elevating the toes. Heel is down, toes are up, and going super slow. And just center of the heel, not letting the foot turn out. Kind of almost scooping a little bit of energy out from the hip socket toward the inner leg and out through the foot. And what I want you to pay attention to, especially as you begin to get the legs straighter, is does your pelvis try to compensate for this elongation? In other words, if your pelvis shifts as you straighten the leg, it's very possible that your psoas and your pelvis are kind of wound up and stuck together. That connective tissue in there is not freely gliding as it should. Okay, bring the leg back. Do this a couple more times on the same leg. So try to sense from under your fingers what the psoas is doing. It's passing over your pelvis and connecting down in your thigh. And we want that area to glide or lengthen. This is the lengthening part of the psoas. So as you slide the heel out, you're imagining that the length is coming from inside the edge of your hip bone, past your inner leg, under your fingers, down to the inner edge of your heel, inner edge of the ball of foot. And especially as the leg straightens, notice if your pelvis starts to move with that elongation. So mine does on the right leg, not on the left leg. And what I notice for me is that when I fix the pelvis in place and I ask the psoas to lengthen, the psoas gets jumpy. It kind of like spasms almost. It flexes up. It doesn't know what to do. It's kind of like stupid about it. It doesn't know how to do this. So this is a way that you can both kind of release and lengthen your psoas. If anything, you're letting the low back relax down, but not necessarily trying to push it down. Kind of sending the energy out from the pelvis along the inner core of the leg, the inseam of the leg, through the inner edge of the foot. And keeping your pelvis pretty neutral and asking this area of the body to lengthen and release. You just kind of pin your fingers there, and you might get a little burning sensation of the connective tissue letting go or freeing up. And then you're going to drag that foot back. Stay on the same leg. This time, bring your left knee up to your left hand. Keep pressure. You can give your right hand a break, but when you're ready, put it back in that same area. And then try it again. Left knee is kind of a neutral position above the hip. And just notice if this makes it easier or harder for you to elongate across the front of your hip, inside the right hip bone. Once you've got the legs straight, take a breath. As you exhale, crunch your ribs down toward your hips and curl your head off the ground. Just kind of pull in on your left leg, but also push the left knee into your hands. Then picture that you're scooping your tail, you're tucking the tail out through the heel and the inner leg. Reach as far out as you can and start to hover that leg off the ground. The right leg gets straight. Reach more than lift. Reach long, like the back of your body is kind of curved in a canoe shape. And so now we're eccentrically, we're stretching while toning. We're lengthening and engaging same time. So we're lengthening out through the inner leg, all the way out through the pelvis to the toes. And then when you're ready, just release everything back to the floor. Pause and take a breath. So go ahead and do that on the other side. And just as the reminder, so the first hip bone is here. The first point is just inside. That was just when we were sort of marching. And then lower, kind of right across the front of the hip socket. that's more where you're going when you're doing that sliding the foot out on the floor. All right, well, hopefully that's fun for you or interesting, and if nothing else, it should free up some stuck stress in the low back and maybe even make it easier for you to breathe. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.